The process of applied functional science is the transformation of the notion into the motion.
Hi, from the Gray Institute, I'm Kelly, and this is the Gray Institute podcast. Gray Institute is internationally acclaimed for its innovation, development, mastery, and delivery of applied functional science. AFS is based on scientific truth, not theory, of how the human body moves in all three planes. AFS allows movement professionals like you to apply the best, most effective, and most efficient movements to any individual based on specific needs and goals. For 40 years, through training, education, and mentorship, Gray Institute has equipped over 150,000 professionals with comprehensive knowledge in the principles of applied functional science. Our goal is to help you become the go-to movement professional. The Gray Institute podcast is questions-based. You send in your questions and we discuss them. Today's questions come from Mike A. Flynn, a CPT and CAFS at Tailored Movement in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mike A. Flynn, if you would like to contact our office, info@grayinstitute.com. We can get you hooked up with some Gray Institute paraphernalia. If you're listening and have any questions, email them to info@grayinstitute.com. We join Gary as he talks about hamstrings, bands, traditional programming, and applied functional science.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we have a number of great questions that we'll attempt to give our best answer from a Gray Institute applied functional science perspective. The great thing about questions is that they reveal a lot, not only about the person asking the question, but their understanding, which usually is quite deep. I've had the privilege for the last 40 years to do seminars all around the world. And during the break time, individuals will come up and ask me questions. And these questions are great. Sometimes I can answer them, sometimes I can't. But I'm always in awe of the depth of the question. Probably the biggest thing I always am impressed with is I know that they're asking the question on behalf of somebody. They're basically saying, if I understood this a little better, I could help somebody out a little better. And so it's never about them asking the question. It's about them asking a question in order to help someone. And the questions that we have today definitely fall into the category of I really care about my patients and clients, and I simply want to do the best. Let's go ahead and get started. First question goes like this. Understanding that the main function of the hamstrings during gait is eccentric control, is there any benefit to including a hamstring curl with a training program? And I love the fact that this is our first question because we're going to have to go deep on this one. And going deep simply means we got to go deep with an understanding of the hamstrings before we can ultimately answer that question. So the question basically gave part of the answer. And part of the answer is that during gait, during walking, during running, during most upright function, that the hamstrings function what we call eccentrically. Now, if you follow applied functional science kind of regularly, you'll know that we'll probably say it functions econcentrically, that during a specific time, it's not only eccentrically functioning, but it's using that eccentric energy to concentrically produce a force. And so we will say econcentric, but for the simplicity of this, let's fully understand that the question is quite proper, and I think the question is quite spot on. So eccentric control of the hamstring, first of all, we have to understand, obviously we have three of them. We kind of almost have four of them. The biceps femoris, really there's two parts, a long and a short. And it's interesting that short part is on the posterior lateral shaft of the tibia. And it obviously then it attaches to the long part. And they also together hook into the head of the fibula and a little bit on the lateral condyle of the tibia. So you kind of ask yourself, wonder what it's doing there, wonder what it's doing way outside there. And I wonder why a big slab of this was put on the posterior lateral shaft of the femur. Of course, then we have our two medial hamstrings, our semimembranosus and semitendinosus. And of course, they start where the biceps femoris starts in the ischial tuberosity. And they tear down medially and they attach to the medial surface and condyle of the tibia. Now, if you are part of GIFT, and GIFT is our 40-week mentorship program, you know that as soon as you hear the word hamstrings, you're going, I think Gary dressed up like a horse. And what I do in GIFT is I transformalize in order for us to maybe understand the muscle a little better. And the reason I dressed up like a horse is I'm a horse and I have these reins. And so my hands are kind of in a central position hanging onto both reins. And the rein that goes to the outside here would be called my lateral hamstrings. And the reins that go to the inside or the left side here might be called my medial hamstrings. And what's interesting is just a little bit of eccentric control, so to speak, of those reins can dramatically control a powerful horse. What's even more significant is to understand that the angle from the ischial tuberosity to the lateral medial part of the knee gives the hamstrings a very significant, especially in upright function, mechanical advantage in the frontal plane, i.e. controlling ab and adduction, not only of the hip and knee, but also controlling inversion and eversion of the subtalar joint. Now, the most obvious thing that the hamstrings do, because they go and wrap themselves around, and the round should be the key word here, around the knee, is that they control the transverse plane. And so when we walk, when we run, when our foot goes through swing phase, the hamstrings are one of the very few muscles that really kind of start showing themselves eccentrically. In other words, as our foot's coming forward, our hamstrings begin to gradually decelerate that eccentrically. And that's kind of interesting because it's one of the very few muscles that does that. And therefore, it's kind of like it's getting ready to do something really significant. And it's like it's already firing. The proprioceptors have already sensed that swing phase movement. They've already turned the hamstrings on. And lo and behold, now we have this ability that when our foot hits the ground, the hamstrings are already turned on, and they have this immediate ability to control things eccentrically. Well, we know the first thing it controls is just the mass and the momentum of the body lurching forward. So as soon as that foot hits, the foot stops, but the body wants to continue to go, and therefore our hip goes through significant hip flexion. It also goes through significant hip flexion because of gravity and ground reaction force. And so all of a sudden, when that foot hits the ground, the hamstring's already being turned on. They then have this ability to control sagittal plane motion at the hip by decelerating, by eccentrically decelerating hip flexion. Interestingly enough, if we stay in the sagittal plane and we go down to the knee, we realize that they have a huge mechanical advantage now to decelerate. And this is one of those that, as I even say it, I'll even confuse myself. So if you're a little confused and kind of visualizing this, you might want to almost stand up and feel this. As my knee flexes, and again, gravity, ground reaction force, mass and momentum are going to be the thing that flexes the knee. My foot is on the ground, but as my knee flexes, my tibia moves forward. Well, as that tibia moves forward, that motion that's sensed, again, talks to the hamstrings and say, hey, we got to keep this up because we got to decelerate that forward motion of the tibia. And obviously, if you kind of look down at the ankle, it's actually beginning to decelerate ankle dorsiflexion. But if it's able to decelerate that, we realize that it's actually functioning as a knee extensor. And that's really easy to feel and see if you just stand up, and if you have pants on, grab yourself in the back part of your pants and the thigh and just pull, just like if you were the hamstrings concentrically, and your knee automatically will straighten out. Again, as that foot hits the ground, the chain reaction biomechanics allow the subtalar joint goes through eversion, the femur and the tibia internally rotate, and immediately the hamstrings go, oh, I have this huge mechanical advantage to decelerate that, especially with the lateral hamstrings. Again, we're going to call the lateral hamstrings both the long and short head of the biceps. And then, interestingly enough, the knee will go through abduction as the hip goes through adduction, and both hamstrings have the ability to decelerate adduction, and the medial hamstrings now have the ability to decelerate eccentrically abduction at the knee. So as the foot makes ground contact, we immediately say, what's going on? And as the great question was asked, says, during gait, it functions eccentrically. And it continues eccentric through most of gait. And then what it'll do is it'll function econcentric as it continues to decelerate internal rotation, hip flexion, and knee flexion, hip adduction and knee abduction, let alone what it's doing up at the trunk, let alone what it's doing at the foot and ankle. That eccentric control now starts to give it power to literally concentrically pull back on the tibia and create knee extension, and pull back and create hip extension. That exactly what we want to have happen right prior to heel lift, because that's what allows us to propel forward. So kind of confusing. It's probably simpler than that, but sometimes when you start jibber jabbering, you make it confusing. But the point is that it's very, very eccentric. And the real point is that ultimately one of the functions of the hamstring is to extend the knee. So the question asked, is there a benefit to including a hamstring curl in a training program? Well, we have a saying at the Gait Institute, there's really no bad exercises. There's really just better choices sometimes. In this case, I'm gonna play my cards and say, I really believe a hamstring curl for the purpose of getting somebody to walk and run or dance or even kick or do anything upright is not beneficial. And the reason I say that is because it's not that it's a bad exercise that's going to cause some bad problems, but I think it's going to cause some confusion, because literally what we're training the hamstring to do, if we're sitting doing a hamstring curl, or if we're on our belly doing a hamstring curl, is we're training it to flex the knee. And what the hamstring does in function, upright function, is it extends the knee. In addition to everything else I kind of menagerie through at the beginning of the chain reaction biomechanics. So as my mama would have said, it's back assward. In other words, it's not only close to what it really does, it's actually the opposite. And so if we really understand, and we're beginning to understand, and I'm not sure I'm even quite there yet, the impact of the proprioceptors creating the reaction to facilitate the contraction of muscle and the sequencing of muscle, we immediately would say, well, if I put somebody on a knee flexion table using the hamstring curl, I would really be confusing what the proprioceptors, not only in the muscle, but the muscle and tendon, and obviously the joints above and below, and obviously in the fascia and the skin and all the proprioceptors, because it would be saying you're kind of consciously trying to contract and flex your knee. In reality, we don't need that. In fact, we need exactly the opposite. Now, we can kind of give another example and then kind of explain kind of maybe the paradox of this. In Gait, we say that the quadriceps does not extend the knee. And that's kind of true. The quadriceps, we can go deep into it, but when the foot hits the ground, the quadriceps basically decelerates knee flexion, knee abduction, and knee internal rotation, as well as what's happening at the hip in rotation and in adduction. And as our body comes over the fixed foot, other muscles, including the hamstring, including the soleus, including the posterior tib and peroneus longus, are really responsible for knee extension. We don't really use the contraction concentrically of the quadriceps to create knee extension during gait, during walking or running. However, it still functions as a knee extensor because it's decelerating knee flexion. So if we would add to this question and just simply say, knowing that the main function of the hamstrings during gait is eccentric, would we ever want to have somebody do a hamstring curl and have the hamstring do just the opposite of what it really does? That's the one question. And then say, in gait, we know the quadriceps functions eccentrically to decelerate knee flexion, knee internal rotation, and knee abduction, as well as what happens at the foot and at the hip. And therefore, would you ever consider having knee extension exercises to complement that? So with the hamstrings, because it's exactly the opposite, I would say no. I would say you probably wouldn't see me using any hamstring curls with any of my patients or my clients or my athletes. but you might see me doing some complementary extension exercises with utilizing the quadriceps. Because again, as my mama would say, that's not back ass work. That's not the same. It's certainly not doing exactly what it does, but I believe the extension of the quadriceps in a non-functional position without the foot on the ground has the ability to complement what the quadricep has to do when the foot is on the ground, and that is to decelerate knee flexion, which means it's a knee extensor, decelerate internal rotation of the knee, which means it's an external rotator, and obviously decelerate knee abduction, which means it's an adductor. Again, very non-functional, doing a knee extension, but it's close. In other words, we would say in applied functional science, there's not that big of a gap. And so I would consider using quadriceps extension exercises to complement a training program. I would not consider utilizing a hamstring curl to complement a training program. Again, great question, because I think not only was it a great question, but there's a great understanding of really asking ourselves, do I really need to do that, or are there a lot of other things I can do to enhance the function, in this case of the hamstring, to allow it to contribute to the success of the human being that it's attached to? And that's what we're really after here, allowing that person to be effective and efficient, and allowing the hamstring to contribute to that ability.
Hi there, this is Jason Ely, Media Director at Gait Institute. Let's talk about the who, what, and why of functional soft tissue transformation. Functional soft tissue transformation is your chance to get hands-on with Gait Institute. Are you aware of the current research on connective tissue and what manual input can and cannot do? Can you easily explain to your client or patient your decisions for testing and treating? Would you like to break out of the mold and provide services for which clients and patients are willing to pay out of pocket? Would you like to use your creativity and problem-solving skills to make every day a fun and positive experience for you and your clients or patients? Functional soft tissue transformation is a comprehensive movement testing and treating process that centers on the individuality of each client. FSTT takes a different approach from traditional structure-based protocols. It is individually context-dependent. Structure is respected, yet individual function is the driver of the process. The intention of the FSTT process is not to train a practitioner to fix parts or pathologies. Instead, it is to identify and improve dysfunction and create better efficiency in movement and function. There is a big difference. Manual applications shared in FSTT are simply mechanical loads that are applied to the tissues to create positive adaptation in movement or function. Utilizing the global, local, manual movement spectrum, learn how to identify abnormal tensions in the body, select appropriate loading for testing and treating, and create a plan to improve movement integrity. This course is designed by practitioners for practitioners, designed to give you practical, objective results that you can use immediately. Check out FSTT online at grayinstitute.com or live on July 27th through 28th in New York, August 3rd and 4th in Palatine, Illinois, and August 10th through 11th in El Segundo, California.
Question 2 for today is there an ideal placement for bands during walks, i.e. around knee, ankle, or underfoot?
Our next question, on one hand, seems kind of simple, but on the other hand, I'll give you a hint, it's quite complex. It goes like this: is there an ideal placement for bands during band walks, such as around the knee, around the ankle, or under the feet? And I love this question because it understands that variability is key in any rehabilitation and training program. And so the quick answer is no, there's no ideal placement. And you'll hear us a lot in our Gait Institute podcast describing the truth of applied functional science and the ultimate strategies, and then the resultant techniques, answering questions like this. It depends. In fact, we might even have to nickname this podcast at some point. It depends. So it really depends upon what you're after. Now, if you're after a really good workout that will complement the ability of the individual to really do what they want to do with more proficiency, and you're obviously using the bands as a form of resistance, And you're basically saying, well, do I want to kind of go around the knee or above the knee and the thigh? Well, obviously we're going to get more resistance directed right to the hips. If we go kind of between the knee and the ankle, we realize now we're putting a little additional stress on the knees, which depends, I believe is okay, especially if we're going to be doing what we call 3D movement, 3D lunges, 3D pivots. If we're going to be doing 3D luffles, which is a lunge with a shuffle, and we're going to do 3D walk-uffles and 3D run-uffles and other locomotor patterns. And then the question also has down at the ankle or the feet. So if I take it below the ankle and hook them to the feet, then all of a sudden there's another reaction that's created by the bands. And so I don't believe there's an ideal placement, but I believe creating the variety of resistance, especially when something isn't what we would call pure functional. Now, you have to understand that we all use bands. I use bands. But a band, by definition, is what we termed years ago an amplifotonic resistance. That simply means as I pull the band, as if I have the band around my thighs and I take a long, let's say, frontal plane lunge, as I go wider, obviously the band has more tension if I get further away from that. And therefore, the resistance amplifies as I move. In real function, the resistance doesn't. In real function, the resistance is in what we call the transformational zone, in the loading and exploding zone. And then when I then explode into the movement, in this case, it's a lateral lunge, before my foot hits the ground, there's really relatively in pure function, no resistance at all. And the only time that resistance is going to build up as soon as that foot hits the ground in that frontal plane lunge, now I have to decelerate that. And if I'm doing a lunge and come back home. So the more variety you provide with a tool such as a band, applying it in different places on the body and utilizing it with different movements, the better we're going to be. That way we're not going to groove what we would call a disproprioceptive movement. I'm not sure disproprioceptive is as a real word, but when my mind doesn't work well, I make up words so it makes sense to me. So basically, the answer to the question is great question, and there's no ideal placement, but there's a lot of different placements we can do that. Obviously, we can put place it even what we would call on one leg just above the knee, on the other leg below the knee to create a little more of a crisscross resistance. And so I think a lot has to do with what movement or what movements are you going to utilize when you have the bands around you, and what are you really trying to get after? And what do you want to, quote unquote, isolate while integrated? That's one of the benefits of bands is based on where they're applied. We can put more force on a different joint than other joints. And obviously, the further you go down into the lower extremities across the ankle, and I do that movement with the band on, my ankle takes a hit, the knee takes a hit, of course my hips take a hit, of course my trunk takes a hit. But if it's above my knee, so to speak, my hips take the primary hit. So even though I'm integrated, I can isolate a little bit. And of course, we would really say, what are you after? What kind of movement are you trying to facilitate? What are you trying to enhance? And if you just simply say, I just want some overall conditioning for this person. I want them to be able to rock and roll in all three planes of motion. I just want them to be able to create a better movement pattern. And even though I know that resistance near the end range is greater than normal, that's what I desire right now. And therefore, I would say, great job with the bands. And great job with placing the bands in various places on the body to facilitate the chain reaction that you are after.
Question 3 for today is in respect to traditional programming. Let's see what Gary has to say.
What I love about questions is it reveals the understanding and the wisdom and even the strategies of the person asking the question. And therefore, it's interesting. I think in doing and having the opportunity to be a movement specialist for almost 45, 46 years now, I think I learn more by listening carefully to a question, asking myself, well, why did they state it that way? What do they know that I need to know? And then hopefully maybe come up with an answer. And this next question is exactly fits that particular profile. So it goes like this. How necessary might it be to include traditional 90-degree internal and external rotation exercises in a training program? And it goes on. This is where I think many times it's the key, and I think it's a key to just kind of what I would call management of anything is when somebody asks a question, just don't jump into the answer, pause a little bit and see if they're going to add some more, because when they add more, it really helps us out. So they added this, especially if I'm already prescribing 3D maps, common and uncommon rotational lunges and balance. And as soon as I read that, I got a big smile on my face and say, wow, I think we got ourselves a gidget here. And so the gidget here is to understand, hopefully, the purpose behind the question and then really see if we can answer it properly. Now, how necessary might it be to include? That's a nice way to put a question. It could have been asked, do we have to include 90-degree internal and external, or is it best not to? And then this one was phrased quite beautifully, how necessary might it be? So let's first of all understand what they meant by, especially if I'm already utilizing 3D maps, common and uncommon rotational lunges and balance. So this professional is doing a great job of letting me lunge forward and backwards in the sagittal plane, side to the right, side to the left in the frontal plane, and rotation same side and opposite side in the transverse plane, and basically categorize them, which I really like, into common and uncommon. So it's more common to go forward than backwards, therefore anterior would be common. It's more common to go same side lateral than opposite side lateral, therefore that's the common. And it's more common to rotate and open up and do same side rotational than opposite side. Now notice I didn't say more functional, it's just more common. In fact, they're both equally functional. In fact, we might need to work on the uncommon ones even more because our body's not quite as used to it and maybe not as proficient. But the key to this question is they added a key word into this question, and that is already prescribing 3D maps, common and uncommon rotational lunges. So what they know, first of all, they know their nomenclature beautifully, which I think is important for all of us. But they know that one of the tweaks that they're going to utilize with their training program is if they're training me and I lunge forward, they're going to let me lunge forward, but they're going to let me lunge forward and toe in sometimes and let me lunge forward and toe out sometimes. Now, that's not only going to affect the lunging leg, but that's going to affect the stance leg as well, creating the rotation that obviously we're trying to get when we do our supine 90-degree internal and external rotation. You can actually obviously even do that prone. And so the beauty of this is that if you look at the profile of doing all 6 lunges, but then doing the lunges and doing them all toed in, and then doing the lunges and then doing them all toed out, we have 18 lunges per leg where we're facilitating pure function and we're facilitating as much internal and external rotation I have in an upright posture, and to facilitate the chain reaction that I desire in order to allow my patient or client to be effective and efficient and proficient and kind of enjoy everything. And so the real question here is it necessary? How necessary? And I don't believe it's very necessary. Again, I think if we take a look, which we'll do quite often, in our podcast, understanding the human functional movement spectrum, that if we take a look at lying down on our back or lying down on our belly or even sitting and doing our what we call our 90-degree internal and external rotation exercises, there's a lot of things that are taken out of the picture. In other words, the environment's unnatural. We're confusing gravity and ground reaction force. We're neglecting mass and momentum. We're actually pre-positioning and trying to just facilitate the one dimension of rotation. So we're one-dimensional and not three-dimensional. It's a little bit of link action, not chain reaction. We're inhibiting a lot of the proprioceptive input that we need. In fact, I think we might be confusing it. We are kind of getting muscles to kind of react a little bit and act, but we're isolating out that hip joint, which we really don't want to do functionally. And we're giving them a task that's not a task that we normally do. If I'm sitting and doing my 90-degree internal and external or prone or supine, you kind of look at that. At least Pooh Bear would look at that and go, why are you doing that? And I say, well, I think I'm strengthening the rotators of my hip. And the real question is there a better way to do that? And the answer is, yeah, I'd go talk to the person who asked this question and say, why did you ask it that way? Because I think they would say, I think a much better way is to do it pure functionally, using the natural environment, utilizing gravity and ground reaction force, leveraging mass and momentum, doing it three-dimensional, having a chain reaction, facilitate all the proprioceptors appropriately, getting the muscles to react, integrate the joints, make it a subconscious reaction, a task that we do all day long, lunging out, reaching for something, coming back, and then obviously getting into what we call transformational zones and constantly combining mobility and stability. So the question is it necessary? Definitely not necessary. If you ask it more personally, do you utilize those exercises in rehab? A little bit. We'll go what we call non-functional, and especially with understanding post-labral repairs and understanding some injuries, we'll just get an idea of the control and strength the person has with that. But as far as a training program, understanding that you're already doing these lunges with the component of rotation, and then you added balance, so you're doing the balance reaches, so you're not only doing mobility and stability, it's definitely not necessary. Because I think if you said, well, I've done all those lunges and I've done all those balances with the chain reaction that I desire, should I then go to my 90-degree internal and external rotation exercises? I would think that there's a better choice. In fact, there's probably 100 better choices. It's actually human movement is all about choices. It's all about the environment we create and what we choose to have our patients and clients to do. And we're constantly asking us, what would be the best choice? Well, the best choice is what you're already doing, but the next best choice wouldn't be to include the traditional 90-degree exercises. The next best choice would be begin tweaking what you're currently doing and even enhance the function even more so. Great job on that question.
Are you looking to reconcile differences and inconsistencies in your movement education? Do you desire to know more about how the body truly functions, how it truly moves? Are you treating and training causes or just the compensations? Do you want to be able to treat or train any and every patient or client effectively? Are you looking to rejuvenate your career, enhancing your passion and purpose? Do you want to share an experience with other passionate movement professionals? If you answered yes to any of these questions, maybe you should explore GIFT, Gait Institute for Functional Transformation. It could transform your career and transform your patients' and clients' lives. GIFT provides certification and functional manual reaction as part of the 40-week mentorship program, as well as being credentialed and recognized as a Fellow of Applied Functional Science. And AFS has the knowledge, analytical ability, and hands-on manual skills necessary for the application and integration of the core content of the GIFT curriculum, thus strategically designating you as a member of a select group of practitioners synonymous with the highest standard of care in the functional analysis of human movement. GIFT is designed for all movement professionals, including but not limited to physical therapists, personal trainers, athletic trainers, strength coaches, occupational therapists, kinesiologists, chiropractors, medical physicians, physical therapy assistants, and occupational therapy assistants. Are you ready to invest in yourself and your career in order to better invest in your patients, clients, and athletes? Check out GIFT at the Gait Institute website at www.gaitinstitute.com and click on Mentorship at the top.
Question 4 asks, in the human movement world, in rehabilitation, performance training, and preventative training, we hear the phrase, the science of human movement. At Gait Institute, you use the phrase applied functional science. Are they the same or different?
So our last question in this Gait Institute podcast is kind of just a interesting question. I really never thought of it, but there's a lot of phraseology out there, a lot of things going on out in the movement world. And this person, I think, is hearing some things and then hearing some other things and going, what's going on? So basically they said in the human movement world, in rehabilitation, performance training, and prevention training, we hear the phrase, the science of movement. In other words, we're no longer, hearing that it's the various disciplines. It's all the science of human movement. And at Gait Institute, they say, you use the phrase applied functional science. Are they the same or the different? And I can answer this pretty quick. It's really the same. Years ago, when we knew we were going to have the privilege to share, which means somebody literally invites you to get up front of more than a couple people and to share your heart and what your understanding of human movement is, we made the decision we're going to try to share as much truth as possible. The tendency is to share your experience, share your preferences, share your opinions, share your theology, share your theories, and we go, that's okay, but I think it's going to be more fun if we try to share the truth, and then from the truth, we share strategies, and from strategies, then we can say, and here's why we do what we do. So in the world of the science of human movement, it's really everything that makes up the ability for a human to move. So years ago, we decided, well, what's interesting is there's already the sciences out there of what allows a human being to move or what inhibits a human being from moving. And they're all stoked with a lot of truth, and a lot of research backs it up. So when we got up in front of somebody, we would basically say, well, one of our strategies is that we do a lot of things in 3 planes of motion. And that is from the truth that when all studies are done watching a human move, we see that they always move forward and back, side to side, and rotate all at the same time. In other words, we're 3-dimensional creatures, and that we move in 3-dimensional space. So that's the truth. Therefore, we would have a strategy for that, and therefore it's rare for you to see us do, for instance, some stretching or strengthening or mobility or stability exercises where we don't incorporate all 3 planes of motion and emphasize all 3, because that's the truth. So applied functional science really is a science of human movement, but it's a little more what we call organized. So applied functional science is 3 sciences. It's what we call the physical science, the biological science, and the behavioral science. And the physical science is what you would think of as in physics. So it's understanding how a human body has to react and act upon this planet we call Earth that has gravity. And all the laws that govern physics that our body has to obey. And so understanding gravity and understanding what happens when our body enters into the ground and the influence of ground reaction force, and understanding that our body in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by another force, and a body in stillness will stay in stillness unless acted upon by a force. Again, those are the mass of momentum and kind of the rules of inertia. And so we need to know that. That's science of human movement. For example, earlier on, we said gravity is the thing that creates calcaneal eversion and internal rotation of the knee and the hip, and knee flexion and hip flexion and adduction and abduction. And so we need to know that so we don't waste time on trying to get the hamstring to flex the knee, which it doesn't, or the adductor to adduct the hip, which it doesn't, or the peroneus longus to evert the foot, which it doesn't. And so we need to know that. And so that category of applied functional science, the physical sciences, is something we spend a lot of time on, but we can't manipulate it much. In other words, gravity's going to be there. And ground reaction force is ground reaction force. And mass and momentum we can manipulate by the speed we do things and the rhythm and rate we do things. And kind of how far away we get from our center of gravity. But they're kind of pure pretty pure. The what we call the biological sciences incorporates everything neurological, incorporates everything as far as our muscles are concerned, and our joints and the capsules and the chain reaction biomechanics and all the things from a biological standpoint. How does a human body move different than, let's say, an elephant? What drivers do we use? An elephant has to obey the laws of gravity, but an elephant moves a little different than us based on our structure and based on our function and based on our joints and based on our proprioceptors and based on our muscles. So we need to know that. We need to know our chain reaction biomechanics better than anybody else in the world. And then the behavioral science is a huge, huge part of what we call human movement science that a lot of people leave out. And we believe that it might be the most significant component of all the sciences. Just what's happening inside that human being, what's in their spirit, what's in their soul, what's deep in their mind, behaviorally, what's facilitating their ability to move or what's inhibiting their ability to move. And what does movement do for them, and what is going on deep inside them that might influence their movement. So behavioral science is significant. In fact, in our GIFT program, the first couple weeks, we spend a lot of time on the truth of human movement, which is applied functional science. And from that truth, we begin to develop our strategies, which, again, if somebody comes and says, why are you doing that? You'd say, well, the truth is this is how this happens, and I'm facilitating that in my clinic, and therefore that's why I'm doing it, and this is what it looks like. And so that's huge that we have this ability to do that. But we realize that there are a lot of behavioral drivers. The truth, people want to be encouraged. People want authentic uplifting. They don't want to have smoke blown up their butt. They want to be significant. They want to be basically engaged. They want things to be relevant. They want to have control. They want to have empowerment. They want to have success. They want to have encouragement. They don't want to be positioned for failure. They don't want what we call an external locus of control, where something or something else is in charge of what goes on here. And they don't like irrelevance. And that really gets into understanding function. If we're having somebody do something and it's not relevant to their life or relevant to their body or relevant to their mind and spirit, we're going to lose them. We're going to miss something there. There'll be a gap in our program. So the science of human movement, we believe, is those three sciences. And there's a lot of science in those three sciences. So at Gray Institute, we actually take the truths of those sciences, develop strategies, and therefore that's why many times our techniques look a little different than most people's. However, and hopefully, if you saw anyone that has the opportunity to be educated by Gray Institute do something, you should be able to go up to them and ask them why they're doing that particular exercise or movement or activity in that particular environment. And they'll pretty much say it's because of this strategy, and it's because of the fact that this is the truth, and this is why I chose that. For example, we can kind of tie our questions together by going way back up into our first question relative to do I need to use a hamstring curl with a training program, knowing how the hamstrings function, and then go down to our second question, which talks about the placement for bands, and then go down to our third question talking about utilizing lunges with rotation. So if you saw somebody with a band on their thigh and they were doing a right foot, right anterior lateral lunge being towed in, at the same time driving their hands anterior at knee height, and you were saying to them, why are you doing that? They would say, well, the truth is that the hamstrings decelerate not only hip flexion but knee flexion, and decelerate rotation, both internal and external, and decelerate frontal plane motion, and really decelerate trunk flexion. And therefore, I'm facilitating the movement with the foot, that lunge, and I'm facilitating the transverse plane for the lateral hamstrings, i.e. the toe in, and I'm developing even more of a reaction of the trunk, doing an anterior reach with the hands at knee height. and actually adding some resistance, obviously, to both hips with a band to facilitate the reaction I want so their body functions better. That's a pretty good answer. And that's all based on truth. So it's not based on tradition. It's not based on kind of how we were trained in school. It's not based on maybe a research article that's improperly looked at and applied. It's not based on kind of the latest certification in something where somebody says, well, just do this, do these tests and add some numbers up and everything's going to be fine. It's all based on science. And so we work hard at understanding the science of applied functional science, the sciences that have been out there for thousands of years, and applying it. And hopefully we can take our understanding of that and help you develop strategies to help you develop many, many more techniques to literally empower and to encourage and to engage your patients and clients to enhance their life. Appreciate you listening to this podcast. It's really all about enhancing you so you can enhance others' lives, and taking the time just to listen to some great questions and hopefully some answers that look at it hopefully from both sides of the road will help you as you get in front of that next precious person. They look at you with those eyes and just simply say, can you help me? And you get a smile on your face and say, yes, I can. The more I know about applied functional science and the science of human movement, the more I know about you, the more I can create the environment to enhance your life. So we really appreciate you listening to the Gray Institute podcast.
This is Kelly. Thanks for joining us here on the Gray Institute podcast. At Gray Institute, our goal is to do one thing the best we can, and that is to help you become the go-to movement professional. If you have a question for further podcasts or questions about anything Gray Institute offers, including education, live or online specializations, or mentorship, please email us at info@grayinstitute.com. If we use your question on air, we will send you some cool stuff. Be sure to look for our next podcast coming soon. Have a great day.
Move your body, come on, move your body.